John T. left Salvage Hunters after 11 years, 142 pounds lighter than he had been at his heaviest, and that number is not just a health statistic. It is the most visible evidence of a man who had, quietly and without fanfare, been carrying far more than he let on. 11 years. That is the number that keeps surfacing in every account of John T.'s time on Salvage Hunters. 11 years of pre-dawn starts, of motorway drives across Wales and England, of cold barns and damp storage units and locations that required a crew to arrive before most people had eaten breakfast. 11 years of moving furniture no one else wanted to touch, of navigating foreign markets where the language was wrong and the pricing system was harder to read than the items themselves. And at the end of those 11 years, a short video. A farewell that Quest TV published in July of 2023, warm in tone, brief in detail, and conspicuously light on explanation. T thanked his fans. The producers thanked him. They rolled footage. And then it was over. That absence of explanation is where this story actually begins. The farewell message itself was careful, measured. T described it as his decision to move on. Not a firing. Not a dispute. A choice. And on one level, that framing is accurate, but it conceals rather than reveals the full picture of what brought him to that point. Because by the time John T delivered that farewell to camera, he had already spent the better part of 18 months rebuilding himself from the inside out. That context changes everything about the way the departure reads. He joined Salvage Hunters when the series launched in 2011. Drew Pritchard was the established name, the antiques dealer with the eye for value and the instinct for negotiation. T was the driver, the assistant, the logistics man. He loaded the van, managed the transport, kept the operation moving when Drew's focus was on the deal. That division of labor sounds straightforward on paper. But what happened on screen was something more complicated and more durable. Viewers did not watch Salvage Hunters because Drew Pritchard was a skilled dealer, although he is. They watched because of what existed between Drew and T inside that van, the ease of two men who had known each other since childhood, who had grown up together in Llanwast, a small Welsh town, picking up bike parts and wartime scraps from fields and selling them by the roadside for sweets and magazine money. That chemistry was not manufactured for television. It was decades old. And it made the show. Which is why attentive viewers noticed when it began to shift. During the later seasons, according to observers who followed the program closely, T's presence began to contract. A new assistant appeared alongside Drew. T's screen time diminished. The rhythm that fans had built their viewing habit around started to feel different. Not broken, but altered. In long-running television productions, adjustments like this are standard practice. Producers introduce new faces, experiment with format, try to keep a series from settling into a predictable groove. But when those adjustments involve reducing the role of a cast member who has become genuinely beloved, audiences notice. And they begin to ask questions. T addressed some of those questions himself. In posts on Facebook, he stated plainly that he had not been fired. He described his relationship with Drew as still intact, still good mates, in his words. That phrase was chosen by someone who understood that the rumors required a direct response, and he gave one. But the statement, precise as it was, did not fully close the door on speculation. Because alongside the professional questions, there was a second story running, one that T had declined to engage with publicly for some time. Before that story can be told properly, the health context must be understood. Because without it, what follows makes less sense. The physical demands of filming Salvage Hunters were not incidental. They were constant. Early starts meant the crew was frequently on the road before sunrise to reach remote locations where dealers or property owners were only available for narrow windows of time. Between those locations, there were long drives, irregular meals, fast food grabbed between shoots, hours of physical labor moving pieces that required real strength. Over a decade, that routine produces wear. T had been managing those demands for 11 years, and the cumulative effect had become measurable. He was tired in a way that went beyond what rest could fix. Medical testing eventually produced an answer. T was diagnosed with hyperthyroidism, an underactive thyroid gland, a condition that disrupts metabolism and affects energy levels, weight, and stamina. The diagnosis explained what had been building for years. Weight gain that seemed disproportionate to his diet. Fatigue that did not lift with sleep. A sense of being depleted at a cellular level, not just circumstantially. The condition, if left unmanaged, his doctors warned him, would worsen. T listened. What followed was not a passive response. It was a systematic overhaul of how he lived. He cut sugar. He reduced carbohydrates. He stopped eating processed foods. He reduced his drinking. He began cooking at home rather than relying on the kind of meals that a filming schedule forces on you when you are 3 hours from anywhere with a kitchen. He started jogging, swimming, walking long distances regularly. Over the next 18 months, the transformation became visible. He dropped from approximately 296 pounds to approximately 154 pounds, a reduction of close to 142 pounds. He achieved this without surgery, managing the condition through medication and the discipline of entirely new habits. That sequence is not a footnote. It is central to understanding everything that came next. Because when someone has spent 18 months remaking the architecture of their daily life, choosing what they eat, how they move, how they rest, how they protect their own health, the calculus around returning to a filming schedule that requires pre-dawn starts, irregular meals, and months away from home changes considerably. The man who left Salvage Hunters in 2023 was not the same man who had been running on adrenaline and fast food and the momentum of a long career in television. He had made a deliberate turn toward a quieter life, and the pace of full-time production sat on the wrong side of that turn. And it is here, at the intersection of his health, his diminished screen time, and his silence on a particular subject, that the rumor that had circulated for years resurfaced with renewed energy. Drew Pritchard's marriage to Rebecca Pritchard ended in 2017. Rebecca had her own role on Salvage Hunters, not in the field with Drew and T, but at the shop, evaluating items once they returned from their finds. She assessed decorative arts, identified furniture styles, determined historical value. Her expertise shaped how much of what the team found was ultimately worth. So the working structure was triangular. Drew sourced, T transported, Rebecca assessed. They worked together across many seasons. Their familiarity was visible on screen. Easy conversation, shared humor, the comfort of people who have spent long hours together in close quarters. When the marriage ended, online communities began revisiting that familiarity. Some viewers who had paid attention to T and Rebecca's interactions began interpreting earlier moments differently. When it became known that T and Rebecca had grown close, speculation accelerated. Some accounts suggested the closeness had developed before the divorce. Others proposed that Drew had become aware of it during the marriage, that this awareness explained the visible tension in T's final episodes, the subtle shift in the dynamic that some fans had noted and discussed. And when T eventually left the show, a portion of the audience read the departure as confirmation. That word, confirmation, is important, because what most accounts of this story do not acknowledge is how precisely unhelpful that framing is. Viewers saw tension and decided what it meant. They saw a departure and decided it proved what they had already concluded. But television footage is not a deposition. A shared laugh is not evidence. A change in screen time is a production decision. What remains true, verifiable and unambiguous, is this: Drew has stated publicly that his friendship with T remains intact. That the bond between two men who grew up exploring the same fields and selling the same roadside finds held through whatever professional or personal friction the end of their working partnership produced. Drew has said T is okay. That they are still mates. That is not the language of a man who considers a friendship destroyed. Since leaving the show, T has not disappeared from television entirely. He appeared on Antiques Road Trip, a format that offers a different pace from long-form production, requiring a single episode commitment rather than months of location filming. His name has also been connected, according to some reports, to Celebrity MasterChef, though no confirmed appearance has materialized. He has reportedly received ongoing offers from reality programming that would feature him in a guest capacity. Whether those offers will translate into something sustained or remain occasional is unclear. He has not said. What is clear is where he has landed. A quiet coastal town in the United Kingdom. Long walks. Light exercise. Second-hand markets on weekends. The occasional restored piece of furniture. A life that looks, from the outside, like the deliberate construction of someone who decided what they needed and built it, not what the industry needed from them, and not what the audience expected next. And here the story turns. Because the easy reading of John T's departure from Salvage Hunters frames it as a loss, as someone being edged out, replaced, let go. That reading focuses on what ended. But there is another version, and it requires looking at what T actually did between 2022 and 2023, before anyone was watching closely enough to notice. He lost 142 pounds. He rebuilt his metabolism. He restructured every habit in his daily life. He did it without a documentary crew, without a social media campaign, without a transformation special. He did it quietly, the same way he had always worked, behind the scenes, practically, without requiring acknowledgement. And then, from a position of renewed health and deliberate calm, he walked away from 11 years of television on his own terms. The person who seemed to be fading from the frame turned out to be the one who had already decided where he was going. That is not the move of someone who was pushed. That is the move of someone who saw the ending clearly and chose it before it could choose him. Was John T's exit from Salvage Hunters driven more by the physical cost of 11 years of demanding production work, or by the personal tensions that the show's final seasons could not fully contain? And if someone you trusted for over a decade was quietly preparing for a life without you in it, would you have seen the signs, or would you have only understood them in retrospect? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to like and subscribe to our channel. For more interesting stories like this, be sure to click on the next video that pops up on your screen. You never know what you'll discover next.